Friends, let us rise to our feet as we sing our opening hymn, number 287. Friends, good morning. And welcome to worship here on this beautiful Sunday morning from the historic sanctuary of the Fountain Street Church in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Welcome to this place in time and space, unique today, unique and special for your presence in it. Whether you're joining us in person or you're joining us online or at another time, we welcome you, and you are welcome. To all who have no church home or who are seeking a home, to all who need strength, persons from all races, ages, all gender identities and sexual orientations, welcome to seekers and searchers, and to those of you who have found your way home, welcome home. My name is Nathan Dannison, and I will be leading us in worship this morning. Before I continue, I have just a couple of brief announcements. First of all, only because several of you have asked me about this, Many of you read the interim reports that are published online, and they go out with the chimes, and I think the 10th one was published. These are updates on our process together as we seek to complete the 5 tasks of the interim process, the 5 developmental tasks. This week, a donation button appeared on that page. I assure you, I am compensated by your church leadership for the work that I do. And you are, that donation is for the Digital Archive Project and for church communications. And because we are ruled by capitalism, it's hard for me to set that up as a donation. But you do not need to pay for those reports, just to be clear. And if you have any issues getting them, please immediately reach out to me. Next Sunday, February 23rd, during worship, we will open and make available the membership book for those of you who want to put your name into the membership book and join this movement as an official member. To be clear, you do not need to be a member of Fountain Street Church to participate in the important work that is doing here. But this is a church that practices horizontal leadership and benevolent democracy. And so membership is part of voting. And from time to time, this church body must vote on important matters. And so if that is meaningful or important to you or something you'd like to do, you're welcome to come forward next week and sign the book. If you have questions about it, just reach out to me, and we can set up a time to talk in the coming days. Then 2 weeks from now, on Sunday, March 2nd, we will be welcoming back to the pulpit the Reverend Dr. W. Fred Wooden to offer the sermon. And we will get Fred back up here and discover what Dr. Wooden has learned in his travels. And I am very much looking forward to that as well. Fred is a tremendous preacher, and I cannot wait for that. And in 3 weeks on March 9th is Women's History Celebration Sunday. And so I hope you will return for that as well to learn more about the tremendous history of women and the work that they have done across the centuries here at the Fountain Street Church. We believe in the practice and discipline of peace. Peace is not simply a metaphor here. It is a way of life. And so I'm going to offer you a word of peace, and you may return it if you wish, but then I'll invite you to rise and greet one another with peace. Friends, may peace be with you. Let's greet each other with words of peace. Hey, Amber.
Peace be with you.
Peace be with you, everyone.
This is my niece Amaya, by the way. This is her first time here. Very excited.
Oh, hey. Peace be with you.
Hey, sister.
Hey, sorry, I kind of been MIA.
Happy Sunday. Good to see you.
And they thought that when Austin students at Aquinas thought he was potty mouth and stuff, and they thought, well, when he went to church, he'd be better.
Oh, no.
In church, he felt like himself.
despair is my private pain, born from what I have failed to say, failed to do, failed to overcome.
Be still, my inner self. Let me rise to you. Let me reach down into your pain and soothe you.
I turn to you to renew my life. I turn to the world, the streets of the city, the worn tapestries of brokerage firms, drug dealers, private estates, personal things in the bag lady's cart.
Rage and pain, the faces that turn from me, afraid of their own inner worlds.
This common world I love anew.
As the lifeblood of generations who refuse to surrender their humanity in an inhumane world courses through my veins.
From within this world, my despair is transformed to hope.
I want to invite all of the children who are here with us this morning to come down front and join me here on the steps. If you're a child of the church, or if you're getting ready for character school or anything else, you can come forward and join me up here for a brief blessing before other adventures. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, team. Good morning. I know that today you have some really special things that you're working on for World Social Justice Sunday, and so I want to get you off into that program. But before you go, I wanted to share with you something that I learned a few years ago. I was traveling and I was doing some work in a faraway land, and I had some confusion about what I was supposed to do next, and so a friend of mine gave me a gift. His name was Naeem, and he gave me a gift, and we were together in a city called Jerusalem, and he gave me this book to read, and it's a wonderful book. It's called Justice and Only Justice, and he wrote his name in it for me so I'd remember him. And I carried this book with me, and I did the things that it said to do in the book. And one of the things that it talked about doing in the book was it talked about showing love to strangers. Showing love to strangers who you have yet to meet. He wanted me to open my heart to the possibility that there were new friends out there in the world. And later on in that journey, I went to a village called Rumane, and I stayed there for a little bit. And when I was leaving, they gave me, from their village, they gave me an olive branch, and it was from a really special tree in that village. I kept it with me. It was this beautiful olive branch from some strangers, and it was a present that they gave me to remember them, because I'd had the courage to show people love in public, in a public way. And so I thought maybe as you go to learn more about some incredible people who have learned how to show love in public, that could just be our blessing, that we remember how to do that this week, yeah? So you can just go ahead and repeat after me. This week, we will show love in public. All right, why don't you follow Katie and make your way to character school if that's where you're heading. Yeah. And I will see you all in a little bit. Hey, hello. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Excellent.
Good morning.
Good morning.
The second reading is from the book of Isaiah.
In the year that King Uzziah died, prophet Isaiah had a vision. He records his vision for the generations and writes,
I saw the Holy One sitting on a throne, high and exalted, and the trailing edges, as of God's garment, filled the temple. Seraphs stood attending God, 6 wings. Each had 6 wings. With 2, they covered their faces, and with 2, they covered their groins, and with 2, they flew. And this one called to that one and said,
Holy, holy, holy is the marshal of heaven's armies. The whole earth is filled with her glory.
The doorposts of the threshold shook at the voices of those who called, and the house was filled with smoke. I cried out, Woe is me! I am wrecked, for I am a person of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. Yet my eyes have seen the sovereign, the commander of heaven's vanguard. Then one of the seraphs flew to me, and in its hand a hot coal that with tongs had been taken from the altar. It touched my mouth with it and said,
Look, now that this has touched your lips, your guilt has turned aside, and your sin atoned.
Then I heard her voice, like thunder, it spoke and said,
Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?
And I said, Here I am, send me. The voice replied and said,
Go, and say to this people, Listen well, but do not comprehend. Look well, but do not understand. Close off the heart of these people and stop their ears and blind their eyes, so that they may not look with their eyes and listen with their ears and understand with their hearts and turn and be healed.
A resolution adopted by the General Assembly of the United Nations on the 26th of November 2007 declared February 20th as World Day of Social Justice. Now, this is not a religious holiday, nor is it a national holiday, nor is it a bank holiday. It is a planetary holiday. We don't have many of those. So I suppose if anyone was going to acknowledge a planetary holiday, it would be the Fountain Street Church. The General Assembly named the following planetary values in its declaration. Quote, recalling the commitment to promote national and global economic systems based on the principles of justice, equity, democracy, participation, transparency, accountability, and inclusion, end quote. It asks us to think about what we mean when we talk about social justice, and these words today have been, the word social justice has been vacuumed up into the political divorce that's taking place in America. We ought to think about what we mean when we talk about this. Social justice, because language changes on you. Sometimes it changes faster than we can keep up. We've been talking about prophecy together. You remember the tsunami stones, ancient warnings from previous generations, the arithmetic that builds cathedrals. Remember that mythology and prophecy transcends language. It's gonna outlive us. Yeah. Let me pray for myself. Inner light, let me be full, let me be empty. Let me have all things, and let me have nothing. Amen. There's several things happening at once around me and in the news and all of these things happening today, and they're all downstream from something else. And they're happening at different levels of consciousness and awareness, and so I'm going to try to present them in order and suss them out a little bit. And let's start with this ancient story we just heard. The words carved into stones set on the mountain. The prophet Isaiah receives a vision. The ancient story says, in the year King Uzziah died, the prophet receives a vision. Now, King Uzziah is a very interesting figure. He's one of the most powerful kings Judah ever had, all the way back to the division of that kingdom it was 2 centuries before his kingship. And he was king for 50 years. He's a popular and much beloved king by his people. King Uzziah introduced agricultural reforms and civic reforms and various other popular movements into this kingdom. But fundamentally, he was loved by his people, and he's remembered in the Bible for his military victories. If the quality of a king or nation was judged by how effectively it destroys its enemies, Uzziah is a winner. And so the story goes that Uzziah, trusting in himself and the people trusting entirely in their king, fall into defiance of the commandments of God. And they place their trust in their king, and the king places his trust in himself. And no one places their trust in God. And so they cease to truly worship the holy things. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to them because they're prosperous. Everything's okay. And so then this vision we heard spoken this morning, Isaiah hears these words from Adonai, from the holy. They're drenched with bitterness and aching irony and heartbreak. The voice says, let them turn away. Make the hearts of the people calloused, make their ears dull, and close their eyes, lest they turn and be healed. Those are the words of a heartbroken, holy God speaking to a prophet of a people who are lost and don't even know it. They don't trust in God, and they don't trust in the warnings of God's prophets, and because they found themselves another God to worship. And why not? And why not? I think everyone here is familiar with the prosperity gospel. This idea, the toxic idea that God blesses the best and holiest human beings with material wealth and prosperity and money. But even if you don't subscribe to the prosperity gospel, how many of us have heard someone say, in conversation, about their own wealth and prosperity and privilege? And they'll say this with humility. Oh, we're very blessed. We're very blessed. We're blessed. With that simple statement, equating wealth and privilege with blessing, this goes unnoticed, I think, in everyday conversation. Now, if you read the Bible, being blessed by God, that could be bad news, you know? But this story that Isaiah is trying to tell us and communicate, the King Uzziah, the people living under the king, ascribe to the king their wealth and prosperity, and they see these military victories, and people have a short memory, and so they put their faith in horses and chariots and military power. This is where they place their trust. They put their trust in a man, King Uzziah, and they place their trust in material powers, principally in the military. And this becomes their moral compass. And these things become their values. And God has frustration and pain because this is a road that leads to ruin. Something upstream has poisoned the water. This week, I received a message in the internet from a person on Instagram, of all things. some beloved child of God out there somewhere on planet Earth. I don't use Instagram. Well, I got a lot going on. But the church uses Instagram, this church. But we do not have the Instagram password. So, womp womp. There's been a lot of staff turnover at the church. And one of the problems this led to is we don't have the passwords to log into stuff. You know, it's a big, huge mess. And we're dealing with it. But Instagram's pretty low on the list of the passwords to get. So, but owing to some fluke of technology, the Instagram messages sometimes make their way through the series of tubes, and they land in my email inbox, and then I can send a reply. And so this week I got a message from, we'll call her Jane, and Jane is not a member of Fountain Street Church yet. So, and Jane was on your church website, and Jane had questions, and Jane said, I'm curious, does your church believe in the Bible? Do you teach the Bible? Now, it so happens that when I read that question, I had not one but 2 Bibles sitting on my desk. Well, and one of them was in Arabic, so I don't know about that. But I looked at the things, and I was sitting in the church. I don't speak for the church, but I haven't met a person here that doesn't believe that this exists. And so I just wrote back, yep. No, I think I know what she was getting at. But setting this aside, honestly, if I could just say as a side note, I think you'll get a better handle on what's in the Bible at Fountain Street Church than you will at any church in the area. That doesn't mean what a lot of people seem to assume it means. But in the words of my sainted father, I can explain it to you, but I can't understand it for you. A lot of churches go pretty heavy on the, understanding it for you business. I think I can safely say that this probably isn't a good place to go if you want someone else to do your thinking for you. But I didn't say this to Jane. She wrote, there's no mention of the Bible on your webpage. I don't know if that's true or not. I haven't looked at it close enough, and that's also not a question. While I'm not exactly the sharpest tool in the shed, I know a religious purity test when I see one. I said, we're a non-creedal church. Many folks around here believe many different things. If you're looking for something explicit where everyone believes the same thing, this might not be a good fit. I thought that should be clear enough, but it wasn't. And so she asked, quote, then where does your moral compass come from? Now that's actually an interesting question. But I'm going to cop to the fact that I'm a busy guy and I run out of time. And I wrote back, Jane, I think that's probably a good question for your pastor. I wrote, I am just a guy responding to Instagram messages. I do not speak for the church, but personally I think people can be moral without swearing an oath, and we don't require oaths. So I did not get into the research that shows that atheists are some of the most ethical human beings on the planet, and I didn't get into that stuff because I got too much work to do trying to recover old social media passwords. So I'd say, where does your moral compass come from? And for the people under King Uzziah, they came from these military victories. I think maybe a better way to phrase this question is, where do you place your trust? Where do you place your trust? I'm not being metaphorical here. This isn't just poetic fantasy stuff. We spoke a couple weeks ago about national borders, about these imaginary lines in the desert south of Tucson. They are imaginary. And I know they're imaginary because I went and looked for them. And I have a friend who won't eat certain types of food. He won't eat certain types of seafood, but he'll eat other types of seafood. And this is for religious reasons. And I entirely respect this. Entirely. I'm not going to insult his practices. And when he is in my home, I respect his practices. But I'm also not going to pretend like it's clear and obvious to me, or that it's common sense or something. But if I'm talking to a Border Patrol agent and he tells me I'm on the wrong side of some imaginary line, and maybe in my brain I just mixed up the wool and the linen or the meat and the dairy or something, but the people who trust in those things are putting their trust in something that maybe I can't see, but that doesn't mean it's not going to get you arrested by the Border Patrol. So it becomes real fast. And so figuring out where people put their trust can be as serious as a heart attack. Figuring out where you put your trust. I mean, maybe it sounds like wishy-washy stuff, but I'm telling you that somebody put that stone on the side of the mountain for a reason. I noticed something else this week. Some bad news coming out of the liberal denominations of the church. There's a clergy shortage that gets written about a lot, and a spate of clergy getting shown the door from some churches. This is not unusual. Sometimes you'll get a liberal, radical preacher type person, they get relieved of their duties, and it happens. It happened a lot in the 1960s and then in the 1990s, and the preacher will go say, well, I preached too radical, my message was too radical, and the church, they couldn't handle the truth, and shake the dust. And, okay, I'll write up a blog post, put it on Instagram. And that's not unusual. This happens in waves. And sometimes in liberal denominations, you've got radical preachers telling hard truths, and you've got congregations that are more conservative than the clergy, and the church maybe wasn't ready for the message. Maybe it was a bad fit. In the words of my mentor, Bob Hill, he'd say, don't get so far out in front of your people that they mistake you for the enemy. And that happens. They threw prophet Jeremiah down a well. Huh? Jesus, right? What happened? Jesus. They let him preach for about a year, and then, oof. All right, This happens. Empty pulpits, though. We have empty pulpits and frustrated clergy and disappointed churches. But this time, there's something unusual happening this time around, because it isn't the paradigm this time that the preacher got too liberal for a conservative church, because many of these churches are radically progressive churches with strong and storied histories of social justice. So what the hell is happening? So the denominational leaders go to the leaders of the church, the laity, the moderators, and governing boards, and deacons, and elders, and presidents of the consistory, whatever they call it. They say, why'd you fire your preacher? Couldn't handle the hard truth? Thought you were a progressive church. And these poor churches come back and say, no, it's not. It's way more complicated. Something is missing. Something else is missing. What is missing? A few weeks ago, I preached about an apple tree that wasn't producing apples in my yard. There was my surface level analysis. I had to get an apple tree expert, an appleologist, to come and fix the issue and help me make the tree healthy, and then apples coming out of our ears. If it was left to me and I wasn't a curious person, I could have glued some apples on the tree, We're not growing apples in Washington, D.C. There's something poisonous in the waters of American democracy. There's something in the water supply. And the response has been to just react, to say we'll do social justice, we'll react, and in the moment, try to force that tree to flower, like hanging apples like Christmas ornaments on the branches of a tree that's dying. And I fear that if we simply become reactionaries, if we just respond to this each moment, trying to mow down weeds, it won't work. And I'll say this, though, it kills me. There's something deeper that's needed. There's something in the water. We could put water filters on the taps, I guess. We'd be safe in here, but that doesn't fix the water out there. We'll go upstream, and we have to go upstream. I've told you the history of this church with internal documents, meeting minutes, budgets, letters. I'm looking for pain points, moments when the church says, ouch, too far. Members of the church This church, the laity and the clergy, started supporting and providing safe access to abortion in the 1960s. And it didn't elicit an ouch response from the church, because it wasn't a wedge issue yet in the 1960s. Not until the 80s did it really become a left-right issue in America. But you know where I did see some conflict and some ouch and some strife? People scribbling notes to the minister and revoking their pledges. Now, it was when Stokely Carmichael was allowed to speak here at the church in defense of the Civil Rights Act and black liberation, 1967. We have to trace upstream the roots of the modern movement that is hurting our nation. I believe that we find its roots in Brown versus Board of Education, a movement to desegregate our schools. The sputtering rage of white Americans being forced to reckon with the possibility of their own white American children sitting in classrooms with little black American children. Today, racism is transformed into modern novelties, with new terms for people of different races. And today they use terms like legal and illegal, immigrant and non-immigrant. And make no mistake, these are racial categories, because they aren't getting ready to fill up the concentration camp at Fort Bliss and Guantanamo Bay with white families. Those aren't white children freezing in cages on the Texas border. Whence this awful plague? When they fought tooth and nail against desegregation, they said it was to preserve some kind of value, some heritage. What was it? You can go and read for yourself. The Southern Manifesto was written by Southern senators trying to claw back Brown versus Board, and their words are appeals to Southern values in the segregated South. What values were at risk? What was at risk? What was at risk, I believe, is the idea that one group of people is entitled to the surplus labor of another by virtue of the conditions of their birth. Slavery in all the many different forms it's taken. And so, yes, also, all of the ways in which a person enslaves another includes patriarchy, xenophobia, bigotry, and new forms of slavery, medical bankruptcy, regulatory capture, the poverty draft, this manufactured homelessness crisis that we have in America. Taking rights and power and capital from one group and giving it to another at the point of a fist or a lash or a gun. And so social justice, standing in opposition to these terrible forces, social justice is a medicine that is practiced on the body upstream, among people who have placed their trust in something that's making them sick. Now, depending on how far you want to go back, we can lay that mantle squarely on the shoulders of the church and its practice of settler colonialism, on the use of violence to steal from other people in other lands until the last thing, the only thing that can be stolen from them is their labor. But upstream, we still have to push and push against deeper currents than that. Because whence this poison? Colonialism, slavery, racism, patriarchy, these things don't stand for their own sake. And they're not self-evident. It's reacting to something else. And so we have to push upstream until we get to anthropology and human psychology. What could drive a human to sacrifice their one precious life on the altar of mammon and feed their soul into these Molochs of colonialism and hatred? And the only satisfactory answer that I can find after 20 years of trying to push upstream is fear. Fear. I see in those crowds of neo-Nazis and Proud Boys and awful, awful, awful images in the news. Fear. Animal instincts, raw and real, from the most primitive parts of the human brain. Fear is a tiny, screaming God. and fear can become its own religious system. Fear of scarcity, fear of impoverishment, fear of insecurity, fear that another might do to them first, fear that we won't have enough tomorrow, fear that the world isn't got enough to go around, fear that it would deprive a human being of the ability to read the stones on the mountain. And the antidote to fear, and I'm afraid to say this, but the antidote to fear, in my opinion, is not simply love, though it's been translated as such into this hobbled together thing that we call the English language. Love is precious and important. Love is incredibly important. But I have seen people do terrible things to those they love out of a response to fear. And I've seen human beings living in terrible fear of people they love. So I see Americans with closets filled with guns to no purpose, professing their love for guns to save them from their fear of guns. And now people who love something they believe will save them from the thing they fear most: tyranny, fear of tyranny that costs somebody to profess their love for a tyrant. No, cover their ears, blind their eyes, harden their hearts. I don't believe that love is necessarily the antidote to fear. I think the antidote to fear, the opposite of fear, is trust. It's trust. Isaiah's vision, those thundering words, it's a response to people who've placed their trust in material powers rather than deeper holy values because of fear. The alienation of these pastors from their churches, despite knowing that they agree on the work to be done, is driven, I think, by a lack of trust. I will not ask you to go anywhere with me out there until I have earned your trust. And if I haven't earned your trust in matters of the heart, how can I ask for your trust in matters of life and death? The foundation of the work of social justice is trust. Now, I've seen your heart. I've seen it. And I trust you. I trust you with my vocation, such as it is, and with the safety and security of my little family. And I trust you because I know you. I've spoken to 300 of you so far, one-on-one. But it's on me to earn your trust. For if I will ask changes or sacrifices of you, then I must earn your trust. And then I must kindle your trust in one another. And trust is more than respect. It's the foundation of a healthy church. And trust is the only thing that is going to be strong enough to stand up to fascism. Fascism arises out of a lack of trust in the world and the people who dwell there. Fascism is rejecting trust and embracing fear, and so it must be countered with trust. You are right now where I believe that you should be. And it is my opinion that this is a good church in which to place your trust. I believe that. And I'm going to do the work every single day to be a minister that you can trust. And that takes time. But out there, while people are suffering, trust is a rare miracle. In just a moment, we're going to close worship with a sung prayer by Roberta Bard Ruby, Earth Was Given as a Garden, and give special attention to the second verse. I think she writes, teach us to trust one another and to use for good our power. Let these words be etched into a stone that we place on the mountainside. To build your home upon this mountain, you must trust each other. You must trust each other. Amen. Let us take a moment together in silent reflection, meditation. The money that you give to support the Fountain Street Church is invested in this community and the important work that we have ahead of us. At this time, I want to invite the ushers to come forward to receive any gifts or offerings that you've brought to invest in the future today. And thank you. And so let these gifts be a sign of nourishment in the generations to come. Let us sow these seeds into the good earth for those who will come after us. So may it be. Let us join our voices together in singing one last hymn, Earth Was Given as a Garden. Go now forth into the world, showing love in public, showing kindness to those you meet, working for the good, and return home to celebrate. Go in peace.